Just so there wasn't any confusion, I asked everybody to stay muted. Can you hear us? Yep, okay. Good.
Welcome, everybody. I think you know everyone in the room, but I'll just introduce our curatorial team. Corinne, Ernie, I tried. Brianna Hernandez and Caitlin Halloran.
Good morning.
Caitlin, you're not in the picture.
I'm not in the picture.
Yes.
There she is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So today we're going to just sort of get an overview of part one of Artists Choose Parrish, which opens on the 16th, correct?
Okay,
Seventh,
so,
okay.
well, it's installed in two different.
That's right. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So the first, so anyway, and there will be one opening for both parts on the 29th of April.
Correct.
And then we are all going to meet in May and do a walkthrough of part one. I forget the date, it's the 5th, I think. So you guys want to, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. So we're very excited to soon be installing the first part of Artists Choose Parrish. And as Marla just mentioned, the first part will be up by April 16th, and the second part will be up by April 29th. And the actual opening reception is on April 29th. So let's just go to the next slide. And as you can see in the first part, we have 20 artists. Overall, there are 41 artists for the entire project. It's a year-long project that's taking place in 3 parts. So as I just mentioned, the first part's coming up soon. The second part will be in August, and the third part in October. So it was really an effort to celebrate Parrish's 125th anniversary, its collection. As you know, we have over 3,500 works in the collection, but also the living artists of the East End today. And so we invited 41 artists that have an international reputation, that have a home or studio out here on the East End, both the North Fork and the South Fork, to come up with ideas about works from the collection that speak to them. And they first did that research online, and then they came into the museum with a list of works that they were really interested in seeing. And so it was really actually a joyful experience to see these artists in our vault and going through these works and just being you know, so fascinated by what we have and making discoveries or seeing connections or artists that they knew, but they didn't know we had them in the collection. So it was a really interesting process. And so we're just going to walk you through the first part of the exhibition. And we're going to do that by gallery. And Caitlin did a wonderful rendering of all the installations that we have so far. And what was also interesting was that some of the artists, they just chose one work of their own and one work from the collection, and others actually wanted to take on entire gallery spaces to create a very, you know, evocative installation of their own concept. So let's just get started. First gallery, we have Eric Fisher. So actually in gallery 1, that's the largest gallery, we'll have Eric Fisher and Claude Lawrence. But Caitlin will tell you something about Eric's choices.
Right. So Eric, as Corinne had mentioned, will be in gallery 1. You'll see all of the galleries are mentioned above right here with the artists who will be presenting in that space. And so Eric has one of the largest selections in Artists Choose Parrish. It's a total of 23 works, 5 including his own. And so within his selection from the permanent collection, he's chosen 18 portraits of women, mostly dating from the mid-19th century to the 20th century. And Eric, while he was explaining his choices and even in his artist statement, mentioned that he was really interested in the relationship between the model and the painter and kind of that gaze that is given and received within the works. And so you'll see this thread throughout his work and the selections from the permanent collection. And so here you have on the left and on the right, these are works of Eric's that he will be showing alongside the female portraits within the permanent collection. And so this will be installed on the north wall of Gallery 1, which is the largest wall in the gallery, and on the east wall, which is one of the short walls in there.
I had a good question for you, but you think we go all do that.
So facing Eric Fischel is Claude Lawrence. He is, I don't know if he's a native of Sag Harbor, but he lives in Sag Harbor. And Claude is also a jazz musician. So I think you can see that in his work, which is very colorful, obviously rhythm and movement comes to mind. And so he will be showing 4 very large scale works of his own and a smaller work of his own, and pair them with Jackson Pollock. And he chose Jackson Pollock because he felt a kinship. He felt like Jackson Pollock also liked jazz, and they lived both in places that have beautiful light. So he chose those Pollocks. And the Pollocks, as you know, in our collections are pretty small. And so it'll be really interesting to see how they respond to Claude's work.
So next we have across the spine in Gallery 2, Eddie Martinez. And so Eddie is an East End artist. And for Artists Choose Parrish, he's gone through the collection and was specifically looking at works on paper and drawings, particularly predating 1970. And so what he found while looking through the collection is kind of the similarity in the mark making that is indicative of his style. And so you'll see the permanent collection work here along 2 works of Eddie's on the bottom and on the right, that there's a similar quality, and that really spoke to the artist. And it was a real driving force in his selections. And so Eddie has chosen quite a few works. He's another artist who has one of the larger selections. And so this will be in Gallery 2 on 2 of the walls, mostly going to be hung in a salon style. So you're really going to see his work intertwined with his selections of the permanent collection.
So together with Eddie and Gallery 2 is Robert Longo. I'm sure you're familiar with his work. What's interesting about Robert, he's also a filmmaker. He's often very engaged in political and social and environmental issues. I'm sure you've seen his works at Guildhall. He's large-scale photorealist drawings. And Robert said that he was always drawn and fascinated by Frank Stella's work, because he feels like, although it's abstraction, it is very, it has a lot of movement, it's very active, and he feels like that about his own work. So he chose this lithograph by Frank Stella, which you can see on the left. And he's pairing it with a work of his own that is called NASCAR Crash, which you can see on the right. And that's a commentary on sort of self-destructive American pastime. And Robert says he considers himself an abstract artist, but working representationally. And like I said before, he just feels that connection to Frank Stella's work, which he feels like it's not just you know, a very quiet sort of abstract work, but it's very animated.
Next up, we have Joe Zucker, and Joe will be presented in the first spine. So this is as soon as you walk through the lobby into this on the north side. And so what's really interesting about Joe's presentation is he really took a look back at the museum, specifically the 1993 exhibition, Past Imperfect, A Museum Looks at Itself, which, as you remember, was curated by Donna DeSalvo. And so particular detail about this exhibition is the red burlap walls that were in the old parish. And so Joe is trying to recreate this with a burlap installation underneath the works that he's chosen from the permanent collection. And so the theme here is really boats and ships throughout the collection along 2 sides of his own works. And in the middle here, you'll see Joe's work. And this is one of his regatta paintings. These are typically very large. This one that will be in the spine during Artists Choose Parrish is 71 by 71, so fairly large. And so alongside drawings, prints, works on paper, we'll also have Peter Campus's video installation. And so it's a nice culmination of a lot of pieces throughout the collection.
I just want to make a small comment here. You may remember Bartholomew Tobo's exhibition, where he also basically had a whole wall full of representation of boats that we had in our collection. I mean, he actually showed all of the drawings and paintings, and also included Peter Campus's work. So it's an interesting sort of new look at the boats in our collection. Yes.
Yes.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who's on the right? You know. That's okay.
Yeah.
And then across the spine from Joe will be Jeremy Dennis from the Shinnecock Nation. He's paired one of his photos you see on the left from the Sacredness of Hills series with a William Merritt Face's Shinnecock landscape. And here he's looking at two things that have an intertwined relationship. On the left with the Sacredness of Hills, considering the way that recently there's been many grave sites disturbed from Shinnecock ancestors in the overdevelopment on the East End, and particularly Shinnecock Hills, and how that is represented through this kind of mourning pose. And thinking about that in relation to the early American landscape painters, similar to how Chase has titled this piece, Shinnecock Landscape with Void of Any Shinnecock People, thinking about how these landscape paintings were used as kind of like a tabula rasa propaganda to say that this space has not been inhabited yet. We can go freely and create something, when really everywhere you look, anytime the ground is disturbed, you will find evidence of these ancestors. And so these will be paired together right across from Joe first when you walk in. And I think there's going to be some fun play between the framing of the works, like the literal frames that these are in, and how they have that story and dialogue together. And then in Gallery 3, Nina Yankowitz is going to be doing another full room installation with, as some of the other artists we've mentioned. She's really interested in the past and the present and the future of the museum in the way that we literally look at these works. And so not only what's paired together and the relationship between the content of these works, but also how are we physically seeing them. So in one of the works, she's placed one of her own mosaic chairs right in front of the work. It's a Chuck Close painting. And so she's inviting the viewer to sit in this chair in the process of viewing the work. In another way, we're installing a ladder, like a 6 foot, almost 7 foot tall ladder with a platform at the top that visitors can walk up and view the entire room or works nearby from this elevated vantage point. And then she also has a chaise lounge that you can lean back and recline. But also some of the works will be slightly propped out from the wall at kind of like an angle, thinking about the relationship to the architecture with the beams and how they're coming in from the angles in relationship to the perpendicular walls. So there's a lot of different installation methods everywhere, from suspension to hanging at different angles. There's also a piece that will be laid out on the floor of her own work that will have invite viewers to walk on it. And so there's a lot of both play on the physical and the conceptual. In the examples on the screen, these works, we're looking at Rashid Johnson and Lisa Chase, is thinking about these layered emotions and the contradictions between them. So those will be nearby each other. So there'll be thematic sections throughout that lead to different perspectives. In this case, emotional. On another wall, she's considering different aspects of death and what is after. And so there's a lot of layering to these new perspectives, both literal and metaphorical, that she's interested in exploring.
It'll be a fun room.
Yeah.
So Tony Bechara, an artist originally from Puerto Rico, and so he's looking at works that, similar to his own work, kind of get out of the sort of the frame, the window frame, the rectangular frame, and actually use different shapes for the works, for the canvas themselves. So on the left, you see one of his own work, Tondo. He does a lot of pointillist work. He looks at color, randomness, and organization. And then in the center, there is the work from Leon Polk Smith, Again, where the colors and the shapes of the painting itself influences or informs the shape of the actual work of the canvas. And on the right is a Bolotowski, which again speaks to him very much because it's a tondo, and he was interested in how the lines and the colors again inform the work, but also the actual shape of the canvas. And he was also looking at artists that, like himself, he felt like were actually established artists, but never made it, big in American art history. So, yeah, that is from his work. And then Ross Bleckner, very tender choice. He chose a work by Eric Freeman. That's the work on the left. Eric, as you may know, was an abstract painter who lived out here, was very close to Ross. I believe they were even in a romantic relationship at some point. And Eric died a couple years ago at age 50 or 51. Very tragic death. And so Ross made a dedication of his own work for Eric Freeman. And it's interesting because Mary Heilman also chose an Eric Freeman because she was also close to him. So, what transpired in this project was a lot of affection of artists for other artists who were friends or mentors.
Also in Gallery 4, we'll have Enoch Perez, and Enoch is one of the artists who had a smaller selection. It's one of his works, which you'll see on the right, and then the Hans Hofmann piece on the left. And so connection is still just as strong, and Enoch was really drawn to this work, partially because of Hofmann himself and his place within art history, but also the quality of the painting and the impasto and the layers of paint. He also wanted to have two comparable works in size. And so these are very, as you'll see on the screen, very close in dimensions. And so you really get the, compare and contrast quality with these two.
And then on the other side of the double wide, which will take up the whole of the south side of the double wide, is Hank Willis Thomas. You may remember from Another Justice last year. And we're still finalizing a statement with him about his selections in particular. But these are some of the collection works that he's chosen. And what we've seen so far is that there's a lot of really dynamic visual conversation happening between his works. On the top right, the Youngerman is paired with one of his retro-reflective works that was here last year, a similar style, a different piece, that has a lot of orange and contrasting blue. And so if for a refresher, the retro-reflective works of his own, they're actually, when you look at them on the surface, they have a lot of bright, bold colors, have flat patterns sometimes. But then when you take a flash photograph of them, there's an image revealed underneath through the process of the flash hitting the reflective material that's on the surface. Mm-hmm. And so he has a couple of those pieces paired with some of the works from the collection. And then he also has chosen two other artists who are in Artist Choose Parrish. So there's an interesting addition to the dialogue. On the bottom is the Claude Lawrence, and then he's also included a piece by Jeremy Dennis to be paired with one of his works that's much more figurative and has kind of flowing dancer shape. So we're still waiting on some final thoughts from him about his selections, but there's a lot of really wonderful and colorful visual conversations.
So Nanette Carter also immediately chose to hang a whole gallery, and she was one of those who were really excited about seeing our works in the collection and making discoveries. And she in particular mentioned two artists that influenced her to become a collage artist. One of them is Romer Bearden, whose work you see at the bottom. Above that is her own work, a pretty large scale, relatively new work. And she also mentions Frank Wimberly, who is another African-American artist living in Sag Harbor, around the corner from her where she lives, who also influenced her career, her what kind of artist she wanted to become. And she said she was also pleased to see these artists in our collection because when she was coming out here in the summer, when she's growing up, she would, she'd come to Beeldhall and Parrish and would only see white male artists. And so she's very happy that this has obviously changed and to see artists of color. She also talks about abstraction being liberating. And so a lot of the works that she will be showing are abstract. Again, a lot of formal visual conversations, colors that informed her choices from the collection. So she'll have a whole gallery that will be in Gallery 6.
And then in Gallery 7 next door, which is a much more intimate space, is perfect for Pamela Council's installation. So there's a pairing between the Dan Flavin on the left and Pamela's piece Auntie on the right. Pamela talks about how both of their works in general are often dedications of some sort, either literally, intentionally, or just in the format and the conversation that's happening. So there's a couple really interesting conversations happening here. One is in the piece Auntie itself, is looking at Diane Warwick and the dedication to the idea of being the auntie or everyone's auntie and celebrating that and honoring that role. So in the image you see on the right, the main difference here is that the neon will be there, but the beads are most likely not going to be there. And instead, underneath the neon will be a bundt cake that's made out of face powder that has a scent to it. So the shape of a bundt cake, but it will be made out of this powder. So there'll be the scent component, the light component. There'll be some reflection of the light from the neon with the bundt cake. So there's this whole conversation about the dedication to the auntie, but then also between that and the Flavin. So Pamela's family has a connection with the Flavin Institute. It used to be the Baptist congregation and in that particular building. And so there's a lot of both family history and historical conversation between what the spaces were and what they are and how they've become spaces of literal dedication, devotion, and transformed over time. There's a bit more that might be evolving about the specific layout, but we're really excited about this immersive space. The gallery will be darkened, and so it'll feel kind of like you're walking into a new environment.
So in the other small gallery in the east part of the museum, we have a whole gallery for Mary Heilman. And so Mary is one of 2 artists within Artists Choose Parrish for this section who has chosen a work of their own in the collection. And so you'll see Narrow Lane 3 on the left, which is one of the permanent collection works alongside the Stephen Mueller piece. And so what's really special about Mary's installation is all of her choices she has a personal connection to. So as Corinne had mentioned, she's chosen the Eric Freeman work. There's also a Chuck Close photograph of Ross Fleckner. And so there's an even deeper connection with both of them within the same gallery. There's also a Louisa Chase, and there's a really beautiful Susan Rothenberg drawing. And so Susan, she actually, she talks about her connection with Susan and how they at one point had switched lofts. Susan had taken over her space. And so it's a really a nice dedication to all of the artists that Mary had been close friends with or even just acquaintances.
And then Leslie Stratford will be in Gallery 9, and she will be pairing 4 of her works with the Motherwell. And she mentions how she had this really kind of fond experience of going to art, being younger and going past the Art Institute of Chicago and seeing this work all the time, and it being a part of kind of developing as an abstract artist, but also thinking about the layers of like social information that can be put into an abstract work. And so again, similar to Claude's, actually funny enough, since they're partners, her works are quite large and the Motherwell from the collection that she's chosen is quite small, but they still pair. We've done a drafted layout and they look very lovely together and kind of almost fit as if they're all from the same strain of thought. So I'm very excited to see that come together.
And then Sam Moyer, who works in abstraction, she often looks at texture, material, and that she manipulates to create her own work, and which is on the far right and in the center. And she chose works by Linda Benglis because she said Linda was a huge influence on her personally and her artistic career. Linda did a studio visit early on in her, when she was a student. Then she became Linda's studio assistant and was sent to the North Fork to deal with some, to do some installation or something. And so she discovered the East End and was immediately taken by the landscape, the ocean, the light, and so forth. And then she and her husband, Eddie Martinez, decided to rent a house out here. So she also feels that Linda Benglis is a very strong artist and just feels like she just does what she does, that she has a certain self-confidence. And, that is something that Sam is really aiming to be. And in the center, you see a sculpture by her. It's part of a series called Dependence, where she sort of leans these two sculptures against each other, but also intertwined. They're made of different materials, and it's kind of like reflecting how we are interdependent with each other. So that is Sam's installation. And then Ugo Rondinone. So when I went to see him on the North Fork, also he was like, "Oh, I'm working on this new piece. It's really exciting. It's called The Alphabet for My Parents." I think he's still working. It's still a working title, but essentially it's a dedication to his parents who were immigrant laborers coming from Italy to Switzerland. I spent the whole day with Ugo because we are from the same region in Switzerland, and we were able to speak our dialect, which is so unusual. Out here, it's really wonderful. So anyway, his work is made up of these 26 large-scale panels with tools hanging on them. And I think each panel is dedicated to a specific activity and the tools belonging to that activity. They're all gold-plated, so there's going to be a huge, it's like I don't know, a bank vault or something. Huge value. But so he's decided to do a whole installation in Gallery 10. It'll pretty much cover all the walls. And then in the center, he's hanging Alan Shield's work because he just felt like it was a good conversation. Again, that materiality. And it's a work that can be seen from, 360 angle.
And then out in the second half of the spine, one of the artists out there will be Cindy Sherman. And she's chosen 2 works from the collection to be paired with 2 of her own works. And she mentioned how she was looking for works that felt already connected to hers through just being visually seeming like they could fit together. So the one on the left from the collection in front of the water will be paired with a piece of hers where she's kind of leaning against a rail in front of the water. And then the one of hers on the right that you see where she's looking almost like, what just happened, will be paired with this work from the collection where it looks like 2 women are maybe telling each other a secret or something. So there's a lot of playfulness there, which is really fun. And she also mentioned how a lot of this work is historical and how she wants to think about placing herself in that history, both in terms of art history, but also the history of the East End. So she's looking forward to building that connection through these pairings.
Next, we have Robert Gober, and Robert is the second artist who's actually chosen a work of his own that's already in the permanent collection. And so he's chosen Frank O'Hara's In Memory of My Feelings. And so when Robert had initially made this decision, there was some conversation of how we could install this and how he would like to present it. And so in previous installations, the In Memory of My Feelings book has been open, pages have been framed so you can see each page. But Robert was very particular in that he wanted to have a very minimal installation. So these will be hanged vertically, one on top of the other. And this will also be in the spine gallery alongside Cindy Sherman.
And to conclude, Michelle Stewart, which again, the Swiss connection, her mother was Swiss, and we kind of had a wonderful chat about that. But anyway, Michelle grew up in Los Angeles, and she remembers going to the LA County Museum, where she encountered the works by Albert Pink and Ryder, Blake Locke, and William Barry Chase, and then discovered that we have works by all of those. And at the time, she felt like those were very contemporary. she said, until I discovered Marcel Duchamp. But she's pairing those with two photo grids of her own that have never been shown. These are about 2 or 3 years old. And both of them are part of her women's series, where, as you know, Michelle always depicts, there's traces. It's something that may or may not have happened. There's some mystery around it. And in both cases, she feels like she wanted to depict something about, women growing up in these bleak rural areas where they are often misunderstood or even abused. So this is Michelle's work on spine too. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions for us right now, please let us know. But also, I think it'll be so much more, clear or striking when you actually see it in the galleries.
Do we have any questions for any of the curators?
Oh,
Pat, is it Pat? No, I can't see. Who's waiting?
Wendy Camera, I believe, has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're muted. You're muted.
You just have to unmute.
There we go. Sorry. It's a
You
beautiful,
have to
beautiful
unmute
collection.
yourself.
Oh, she did.
She did.
I am.
I think we're on low volume. Hold on.
Yeah, you have to go to the audio, but the arrow next to the microphone.
All right, now try talking.
How's that?
Yeah,
Perfect.
Good. Thank you. It's a beautiful, beautiful show. I'm so excited about it. Thank you so much. Great presentation. The Hank Willis Thomas, will the guests once again be able to take pictures with the flash to see the image behind the image?
Yes.
Great. That's all I needed to know. Thanks. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. One more thing. The Allen Shields, will that be hung so visitors can walk behind it as it has been displayed in the past?
Yeah, it will actually be hung in the center of the room.
Great.
Yeah,
Even better. Thanks.
yeah.
Any other questions?
No, just a spectacular collection.
Thank you. We're getting double thumbs up. Okay, so we will see you all, I hope, at the opening on April 29th.
Yep.
And then at our meeting in May, in person. And feel free to, if you have other questions, feel free to email me or Casey and we'll get it to the right curator.
And I believe you have the checklist and the artist statements.
We do. Thanks to Tracy,
Yeah.
Casey. Yep.
Yeah. Has this been recorded?
I believe so. I hit record before I came in here, so it is recorded.
I think it said so on the screen, Lou.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I tried to do it with my iPhone, but you never know.
No, I'll be
Well,
able
thank,
to do this by the end of the day, hopefully.
right.
I also wanted to add,
Wonderful.
there will be several artist
Thank
talks,
you.
including at the opening.
Ah, wonderful. Will Mr. Chase be there?
Only in spirit.
After.
Yeah.
And always.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you
right,
again.
Thank you guys, and we'll talk.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.